Happy Easter, everyone. Good morning. Welcome to Business Morning on a holiday, but we still do business. You're welcome to the program. I'm Amy John Mekwa. We start from the global space where oil prices fell about 1% on Monday after nuclear talks between the United States and Iran progressed, reducing the concerns that the dispute will reduce supply from major Middle Eastern producer. That, of course, is Iran. Brent for this morning lost 70 cents. That's more than 1%, to settle at $67.26 a barrel. $64 on the dot is what we have for WTI after it lost more than 1% for this week. Now, U.S. and Iran agreed on Saturday to begin drawing up a framework for potential nuclear deal. And Iran's foreign minister said that after talks that a U.S. official described as yielding very good progress. The progress on the nuclear discussions follows further sanctions by the United States last week, including against the China-based Teapot oil refinery that alleges processed Iranian crude, ramping up pressure on Tehran amid the talks. Teapot is an industry term for smaller independent processors. Concerns about tightening Iranian oil supply and hopes for a trade deal between the United States and the European Union pushed both benchmarks, that's Brent and WTI, up by 5% last week. That's the first weekly gain in 3 weeks. Separately, Russia and Ukraine blamed each other on Sunday for breaking a one-day Easter ceasefire declared by President Vladimir Putin, with both sides accusing the other of hundreds of attacks and Kremlin saying that there was no order for a ceasefire extension. The International Monetary Fund has shared findings about the completion of the 2025 Article 4 mission to Nigeria. The mission notes that Nigeria's economy is recovering gradually from recent shocks, including lower oil production and global financial tightening, although inflation remains elevated, while some moderation is expected in the near term. Growth, they say, is projected to improve modestly in 2025, supported by reforms in the oil sector and agriculture. Key policy recommendations that they are giving include fiscal consolidation by strengthening revenue mobilization and reducing fuel subsidies to ensure debt sustainability. On monetary policy, the CBN should maintain a tight monetary stance to curb inflation and stabilize the exchange rate. And on the fiscal side, structural reforms should include accelerated efforts to improve governance, diversify the economy, and enhance social protection. The IMF has also warned of risks which include volatile oil prices, security issues, as well as delays in reform implementation. In anticipation of the International Monetary Fund and World Bank spring meetings, which begins today in Washington, D.C., the Central Bank of Nigeria, in partnership with J.P. Morgan, the Nigerian Exchange Group, as well as Africa Private Capital Association, hosted a global forum at the NASDAQ market site in New York. The forum, titled The Nigeria Investment Agenda, Pathways for Growth, had partnerships and convened global investors, diaspora leaders, and senior financial stakeholders to examine Nigeria macroeconomic prospects and ongoing reform progress. During his commanding address, the governor of the central bank, Mr. Layemi Kadoso, outlined his comprehensive reform strategy encompassing monetary tightening, foreign exchange market transparency, and enhanced financial governance. He emphasized that these initiatives establishing the foundation for sustainable macroeconomic stability and heralding a new era of transparency and confidence. Governor Kadoso affirms his unwavering commitment to rebuilding credibility through orthodox monetary policy, transparency, and consistency. He said they inherited a crisis of confidence, but have chose a different path, and they are very decisive about it. And still in Washington, World Bank President A.J. Banga has set the tone for conversations at the spring meetings, of course, which starts today expectedly. The ongoing trade tension, which centers around the United States and China, but has overarching effect on global economies, top the list. The World Bank is mostly concerned about the impact on emerging economies.
As we all know, uncertainty and volatility are undoubtedly contributing to a more cautious economic and business environment. I think that's going to affect how governments and businesses make their investment decisions right now. But meanwhile, interestingly, developing economies are playing a far more central role in global trade than they did, say, 2 decades ago. And in that time, the global trade has nearly quadrupled in nominal terms, and the share of the developing countries in that trade has nearly doubled from about 1/5 to almost 2/5. And again, half of their exports now go to other developing countries. At time back in 2000, that was just 1/4. I think this shift brings both an opportunity and exposure. Countries with export-led growth models, particularly those reliant on commodities or manufactured goods, they're much more vulnerable to disruption. But they also have policy levers to help manage the uncertainty and position themselves for a longer-term resilience. So to give you an example, many developing economies still maintain higher tariffs than advanced economies. On the average, several percentage points higher on key imports. I think that creates a real risk of reciprocal tariffs and, most importantly, lost competitiveness. So a broad-based liberalization, not just with favored partners, can help offset these risks and actually expand market access.
Now, some shareholders have kicked against the 436.5 billion naira paid to the Asset Management Corporation of Nigeria, that's AMCON, by 7 banks as banking sector resolution costs in 2024. The figure represents a 158% increase from the 276 billion naira paid to the corporation by the 7 banks in 2023. AMCON was established in 2010 to stabilize the Nigerian banking system by efficiently resolving the non-performing loan assets of banks in the economy. The banking sector resolution costs, that's called AMCON levy, is charged based on Corporations Act of 2015 at 0.5% of the bank's total assets, plus total off-balance sheet assets. Now, let's just look a bit back to last week. That was on Thursday when we had the Minister of Power give an assessment during the ministerial briefing assessment that we had, and we took it live here on Channels Television. And he did, that's the Minister of Power, and he did share some achievements by his ministry. One of it is that 150 million Nigerians now have access to adequate electricity. That's what the minister said. And that tariff reforms have been slashed by 1.1 trillion naira. And then, of course, there was a question about the 2 trillion naira Genco's debt to be paid by the federal government in December. Now, let's get an expertise on all of this as somewhat get an objective conversation. We're doing that with Professor Yemi Oke, SAN. He's the Professor of Energy and Electricity Law with the University of Lagos, joins us from Leeds. Professor Oke, good morning and welcome to the program.
Good morning, and sincere thanks for having me.
Great. So I don't know, you must have seen or read excerpts from what the minister said. I think top on the list is that 150 million Nigerians now have adequate electricity. I wonder what your thoughts are if you were to assess the workings of the ministry so far.
Realistically, I read the briefing and I later viewed the video, the entirety of the media briefing of the Minister of Power. Of course, we've had a number of commendable achievements under its regime, which I will also allude to in the course of my interaction with you. But I want to slightly amend the statement saying 150 million Nigerians have access to adequate electricity, because when you talk of adequacy of power, it's in relative terms. And if you say we have increased access I agree with the Honorable Minister to that extent. Due to no fault of his or the current administration, we've been struggling with access, no doubt. Over time, we've had increase in access, but not sufficient. It can never be sufficient. Access in the sense of the recharacterization of the grid, as well as the structuring of the grid, as well as the characterization of the bands, where we have band A, band B. And the Honorable Minister also alluded to the fact that we've had increase in earnings of about 700 billion because of the recharacterization of the band structure. I agree with that. What we also need to bear in mind is that over time we've had remarkable increase in liquidity in the power sector, which was a huge challenge. These schools have more funds now, so meaning the vulnerability levels of the discos are actually declining. We've also, as experts, we've also tracked the frequency of grid collapses. It's actually on the decline. It's going south. We normally would have had like 16, 17 average. Last year, we had about extra 10, but one hyped collapse, which would have been 11. But this year, we haven't had very significant collapses in the national grid. And I want to identify that to be a very positive development, because we're witnessing appreciable levels of grid restructuring. Recently, we had the coming on board of Nigeria's independent system operator, which is to deal with the system issues, the grid issues, and the rest, like is done in other countries. These are things we've advocated for several years. I think we're getting there. Methane issue is also there. The government is now stepping in to bridge the methane gap. But of course, those will ultimately scale up assets. But the adequacy of assets is something that I would definitely disagree with my friend. It's not adequate. Well, it's improving, no doubt, because we track all those developments in the power sector. Assets is increasing. I give it to him. Then we've had declining trends of grid collapses. We've had improved levels of liquidity at the level of the disco, but we're still struggling with the regulatory environment and power sector there, which are questions I guess we'll still go to bring up in the course of our conversation, so that I can shed light on that for Nigerians.
Yeah, before we get to that, Prof, during that meeting, there was also the conversation about infrastructure connecting generation to distribution. So sometimes we hear that power is wasting because the distribution does not have enough capacity, to take up what has been generated. Could you help us clarify, what the situation is?
Yes, that's what I said. As I said, we've seen noticeable trend at the level of grid restructuring. The minister, of course, is somebody that listens, because some of these stuff things are sent to him personally and to other colleagues in the power sector. We needed to have restructured our grid configuration several years ago, more than 10 years ago. Now you heard the minister talking about regional grid. It wasn't like we are trained to say, oh, this is southwest grid, this is northeast grid, and what have you. No, we need to compartmentalize the grid so that whatever happens at the national grid would not necessarily affect the whole country. If something happens in Oshogbo now, it's going to affect the entirety of the country. No, it's not done anywhere in the world like that. So we're dealing with that. And then we're also dealing with issues of efficiency, grid efficiency. And we've always had issues in the area of transmission losses. Transmission losses is something that a lot of Nigerians are not aware. It's at the table of the federal government, meaning if federal government is responsible for generation at the level of the GenCos to the tune of 1 trillion naira, that's what they're going to pay for. But in the course of willing it to the transmission end, there will have been losses in that cost due to transmission dilapidation and what have you. The GenCos will not pay for that, because like delivering 1 million barrels of crude oil to you, and if there is leakage in the pipeline or the cost of moving it to the end users, they are going to be the one to pay. What the end users get is what is paid for. And also, I've identified over time the weak link, the weakest link in the power sector value chain is that of the discos and the consumers. And I'm saying it on national media, that we still have a lot of losses, a lot of leakages at the levels of the discos and consumers. Increasingly, we still have huge number of bypass, and the discos needs to be taxed to do maximum recovery of what is given to them. So that was one of the reasons why we had a lot of debt overhang in the power sector. So there is that aspect, and then we still have issues of this metering thing that the federal government is trying to deal with, because Nigerians, in as much as Nigerians are willing to pay for electricity, what we said as experts was that it would be illegal to get Nigerians to pay for electricity not consumed. It will also be wrong, criminal, to consume electricity and not pay. So once that gap is bridged, an average Nigerian can now modulate or regulate their consumption pattern, which is what the metering initiative is trying to achieve. Well, we've had a series of metering initiatives from CAPME to MAP and the rest, but the fact is we still have that gap in there. And that should be a challenge for the discos. So how much of the power that is given to the discos is actually paid for? How much of the generated megawatt gets to the end users? How much is paid for per unit? So we need to go back and rework the mathematics. And that was why I agree with the minister when he said we needed to restructure the tariff. We need to restructure the tariff in order. In as much as I'm not going to support increasing tariff at this point in time for Nigerians, we need to work in the area of tariff restructuring and efficiency in collection. I still believe that the cost, which the discos will talk about I don't want to go into the technicalities of the cost and other operational issues, is still relatively huge, and they need to improve their collection ratio to what's given to them. And we also noticed the trend in terms of generation, as you rightly said. But the cement is supposed to bring about certain miraculous realities, which I, as a stakeholder, am not as optimistic. Maybe my pessimism is informed by the fact that we've always had issues in terms of what certain entities are supposed to be doing, right from the Manitoba to Siemens. Siemens is needlessly delayed. And I listened to the minister when he talked about the fact that we had the COVID era, and then we had transition from the previous regime to the current regime of Bola Tinubu. But Siemens should have come on board. Siemens is to restructure the grid, bring about better efficiency, to increase the grid capacity to about 20,000 megawatts. Because the idle megawatts that are stranded there may not be able to come on board because of the dilapidated nature of the national grid as it's currently structured. But by and large, it's a work in progress, no doubt, but we still have huge challenges in the power sector, particularly the debt overhangs as well as the regulatory environment.
And now we have... Now, Prof, we have states that are supposed to be actively involved. I think we are also supposed to be talking about exactly the state's grid and all of that. I wonder if we've had some states domesticate that law, but I don't know if we're feeling the impact yet, or perhaps I'm being too impatient.
Let me confess to you what we are pushing for, because this so-called decentralization thing, people have been accusing me, let me see the problem because you are an advocate of decentralization. Yes, I'm happy that we push aggressively for the centralization of the power sector, because that was what the law said. Even the unamended constitution provided for decentralization, but we weren't implementing it. So we're able to get to that level now, gladly. We push for the centralization of the power sector. We had it. We push for new electricity act, which would now be a piece of legislation to operationalize the power sector. We have it because the old law was not intended to do that. It was meant just to bring about reforms. We have the new law. We also push for consolidation of the regulations. I said the power sector was over-regulated. We had regulations on this, regulation on that, and we advocated that we needed to streamline the respective regulations in the power sector in a kind of a bundle or two for efficiency and management. We've had that. Comprehensive power sector regulation, we've had that. Now is the stage for operationalization. I have a problem with that. The problem I have is this. I need to tell Nigerians as stakeholders, we are pushing federal government to gradually handle excessive funding of the power sector. It is not the responsibility, as the law stands today, it is not the sole responsibility of the federal government of Nigeria to invest, generate, transmit, and distribute electricity. I was saying, federal government, if there is no electricity in Ogun State, you can ask Governor Abiodun. If there is no electricity in Oyo State, you can ask our very good friend, Governor Sheyi Makinde. You can ask the governor of Bayelsa. You can ask the governor of Kogi. You can ask the governor of Borno. Why? Because all of them are supposed to come on board and make sure Nigerians have access to electricity. If federal government is not doing much, the state should do something. And it's not a question of digging your hands in your pocket. It's about how bankable, how cooperative you are operating or governing your state. If your state is efficient in terms of business, if your state is one that honors its contractual obligation, investors are going to come because there will be an indication. It will mean that your state is bankable, that your state is efficient, and your state is ready for business. Investors are going to come naturally. So investing in the power sector is not that you're going to dig your hands into your budgetary allocation to fund it. No. They're going to make sure your state is efficient in terms of governance, is transparent and efficient to procure things, to have access to land is transparent. People are going to come and invest in the generation, transmission, distribution, and services. So it will get to a level which we are pushing. State A may be on 24-hour access to electricity. State B may be on 13 hours, while State C may be in total darkness. It's a question of how sincere, ready, and efficient the governors get to discharge their responsibility to their citizens. So you can't drop the challenges of the power sector at the table of the federal government. The era of that is gone. So we are saying what the law says, if there's no electricity in your state, be it generation, be it distribution, be it transmission, be it metering, be it related services, Nigerians should start to ask their state governor to give them access to electricity by going out to bring investors. Federal government will continue to do its bit, but we are saying federal government should stop excessive funding of the power sector so that they can use the money to fund national security, pay ASU, my own union, and others, fund education, and I will always ask for ASU. So give the money, the trillion that the federal government is spending.
But Prof, that's higher electricity tariff. That's higher electricity tariff for Nigerians. Why don't we wait for the states? Why don't we wait for the states to get their infrastructure right and structured first, and then we now tell the federal government to hands off because of what Nigerians are facing?
Yes, let me tell you. The way it was in this, if you don't push the states, they're not going to do something about that. I'm not, in as much as federal government may want to spend more for the transmission, it's fine. But I'm saying federal government should start to bring down the level of their funding and exposure to the power sector. I know the federal government will probably still spend relatively more because federal government is a stakeholder in the power sector to the tune of 40%. I understand that because of the Ministry of Finance Incorporated. I understand all those. But we are saying federal government should start to put up the red flag. State, I don't have money to fund the power sector because you are now in charge. You are your regulator. You set up the regulatory institutions as advocated. now the states should start to do. Some states will be okay with 5 megawatts, particularly in a particular region. Some states may be like 500 megawatts. We need to start to do targeted generation for specific areas. If federal government is not issuing the red signals to the states, they are not going to do much. Let me come back to the issue of increase in tariff for Nigeria. The answer is no. The answer is no, because let's go back to what happened in the telecoms. You are saying if federal government gives more licenses to telecoms operators, then there will be increase in their tariffs. The answer is no. It brings competitiveness into the market, and it stirs up efficiency in terms of market. And I'm saying this, I've always said, an average Nigerian is willing to pay slightly more for electricity provided it is available. It will always be cheaper than generating through diesel and petrol. And Nigerians are now generating through batteries, we call it inverters, and solar. And you could see federal government stepping in to channel appropriate direction for the power sector. Federal government says, hey, you can't be importing solar panels into the country because Nigerians are spending hugely to procure solar panels. We can start to manufacture our solar panels in Nigeria.
Prof, let them give Nigerians power. We won't need to import. But I also wanted to chip in there that the stakeholders.
But it's not the federal government. It's not the federal government alone that will do it. If federal government had been trying to increase our generation to 20,000, and states like Bayelsa is doing 2,000, Borno is doing 500, Kaduna is doing 1,000. That's why I said we need to aggregate all these megawatts from all available sources. Some states are better efficient, are better positioned for windmills. Some can do extensive solar farms. Yeah. Some can do renewables. Some can, like we can't abandon the hydro. Kashimbila, Mambila, these are hydro projects that should have come on stream. Let's have these megawatts come from everywhere and any angle. Nigerians need electricity to power their homes and businesses. Exactly. And I'm sure by the time we start to tax the state, there will be serious improvement in the power sector. But so far, so good. It's a success story.
At least we don't have any power grid collapse. Grid collapse. We've not had any this year.
We got to get to zero levels.
We pray.
Sustain the trend.
Okay. All right, Prof. All right, Professor Yemi Oke, Senior Advocate of Nigeria, Professor of Energy, Electricity Law at the University of Lagos. Thank you so much. We share your optimism and to keep us hopeful.
We'll make Nigeria work. All of us will all make Nigeria work.
Yes, exactly. Thank you so much and enjoy the holiday.
My pleasure. Thank you. Bye.
All right, let's take a break now. When we come back, another important conversation awaits you right here on Business Morning. Please stay with us. Watching Business Morning. On this Easter Day, we do business, and we're going to discuss Nigeria's expatriate law, the quota. It's been on for a bit, but I wonder if you saw the last meeting that the minister had with stakeholders, and he was really crossed with what's going on. Said even some members of the cabinet, the Federal Executive Council, abuse some of that, and they ask for and approve things that are not supposed to be. The jobs that are supposed to be for Nigerians are being given, to foreigners. But one of the stakeholders that was there is Mr. Adewale Smart Oyerinde. He's the Director General of Nigeria Employers Consultative Association. Mr. Oyerinde, you were there and you saw how the minister was really angry and all of that. But these are realities, because he even said some ministry or a minister had approved a job as small as maybe driving and, and these are the realities. I mean, you are employers.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think first we must commend the minister for taking the bull by the horn, It takes a lot of guts to try to sanitize a system that has existed or worked in a certain way for many years. And humans, as we are, once you are given an inch, within the context of inappropriateness, you naturally want to ask for a mile, and that's what we think happened over many years. Where, according to him, you have expatriate, you have organizations or government agencies asking for quota, for ridiculous quota for drivers, quota for waitresses, quota for so many ridiculous things. So I think it's coming, shook the ministry, shook the whole system, and the reforms that is championing, which are very laudable reforms. I think they make a lot of sense. In the context of protecting jobs, in the context of getting credible expatriates, because we really need expatriates, really, but getting credible expatriates to come to this country to add value to this, to our developmental stride. And if you check around the globe, as it were, I think homeland security is becoming a major challenge. I listened, is it yesterday or this morning, that President Trump has again said if your visa is expired and you are caught, you will not only be deported, you will also be fined. Your visa is expired. Ordinarily, your visa is going to expire. You should ordinarily do whatever it takes for you to renew. But if you decide not to renew, that is willful risk that you are constituting to the country. And I think it's quite interesting, the reforms that the minister is driving. And we supported the reforms, or we support the reforms.
So maybe you should give us some highlights of the reform. I think it begins from May 1st. But what are the highlights? And just before you go on, the thing with Nigeria is having the reform and the law is one thing. Actually enforcing it is another thing.
Well, from what we've seen of the antecedent of the minister, if you've traveled recently to the airports, you'll have seen some innovations that they've brought into the clearance, onto the boarding and onboarding, into the clearance, the immigration area of the airport. You will have seen some very innovative reforms, and it's working. So, and we also believe strongly that Nigerians are not necessarily difficult people. All we need is create a system that works, and then people will follow. And you find one or two persons that will not necessarily want to test the waters again, to say, this is how we used to do it, so let's do it the same way. And
let's settle somebody.
Yeah, exactly. And he has put in structures, automated a lot of processes, that personal interaction between the individual and another individual has been limited significantly. Collection of your e-visa has been automated, that you don't have to go to the bank to pay, you don't have to see anybody to apply. You apply it on your system. Your e-visa is sent to your system. So the whole system sounds good to be true within the context of what we have seen before and what we have known before. And that's the reason why stakeholders supported them. We are supporting that drive to sanitize that whole process. Not only the expatriate quota administration, but also the immigration system itself, so that beyond jobs being protected, the homeland is also protected.
So what are the highlights of this law, which begins on the 1st of May?
Yeah, I'll give you three. One is business permit. In the last 1 month, there was a news by the EFCC that they busted some foreigners at Ikoyi, where they rented a whole apartment, and the predominant business there is illegal business. It's illicit business, and they're all foreigners, over 100 of them, carrying out illicit businesses in Nigeria. The point is, how did they get in? Which businesses or which business did they register? So the first reform is to sanitize the whole process of business permit. Rather than just issue permits, the ministry now will ensure that if you want to do business in Nigeria, they will physically visit the location to be sure that actually the business that you propose to transact in Nigeria is the same business that you're transacting. That is quite novel, and that we think should work. The second part is the issue of the temporary work permits. And according to the ministry, they have their data. It said we have people that have abused the temporary work permits. Temporary work permits for 3 months. So you have people that have use temporary work permit to be in the country for over 5, 6, 7 years. So every 3 months you renew, every 3 months you renew. So the idea is if you want to stay for 1 year, why not just apply for your SEPA card and stay for 1 year? And if you want to apply, you want to stay for 2, 3 years, why just keep exploiting the temporary work permit? Because with temporary work permit, you don't pay. So you can stay for 3 months, and then after 3 months, you renew your temporary work permit. So the rigmarole continues. So somebody that is not qualified can actually be in the country for 10, 20 years using the temporary work permit. So he said they are going to also deal with that so that they can monitor who comes in and they can monitor who goes out. And also of interest is the citizenship process. You know, if you desire to be a citizen of the country, the rule has changed a bit, the processes has changed, all with the focus of, one, protect genuine investors. Because sometimes when people violate these processes, you know, we say the expatriate community have violated, but meanwhile, not the whole expatriate community. You know, we have credible, very hard-working expatriates in this country, and that are showing commitment in the context of development of this country. You know, during the stakeholder meeting, we had an elderly Indian that said he has been in Nigeria. He has invested in Nigeria. He started his first investment in Nigeria was about 46 years ago. And he has continuously built his business, employing Nigerians, helping within the context of development. So there are expatriates that are actually contributing. But you see, you have some that are ordinarily, they are not supposed to be in this country because of the way they came into this country. So dealing with all those processes, sanitizing that whole ecosystem is what the minister has decided to do. And between May 1st, when the implementation will start, the ministry has given 3 months, is it moratorium or what do you want to call it? So between May 1st and August 1st, if your visa is expired, go and apply. If your passport is expired, if your documents are expired, go and regularize in 3 months. It will be a pat in the back. You know, it will support you to regularize all those papers. But from 1st of August, the proper enforcement and penalty accrued will commence, which we think is fair enough.
Yeah, well, it's individuals that will have to enforce. As you said, some people will be in the country. They came for a temporary work visa. It's supposed to be for 3 months, and somebody in authority, at least representing an authority that saw the renewal, sees the history, and keeps on renewing. So you know, that's why I said having the law is one thing.
You know, it's a racket. It starts from the head. You know,
obviously,
it starts from the head, and I think he has also said he's going to limit the approval levels of directors within the context of that system, so that the core of approvals, you know, is limited to those between his office and 1 or 2 offices that can actually deal with the core of those issues. You know, if you don't deal with it, you know, extraordinary situations, you know, require extraordinary solution. And if they realize they understand the system better, and they've seen the loopholes, they've seen the gaps within the context of that system, and they decide to block all the loopholes. For us, it's quite interesting, and I think it's worth supporting.
Yeah, it's a new era, and we'll stay hopeful.
Yeah. And I think one of the key takeaways for us during the stakeholder meeting is also the ministry's acceptance for us to have a clearing desk or a mediation desk. So during the course of the implementation of the reforms, and in fact, we have a committee comprising the organized private sector and the ministry that are already working currently to also look at the service delivery modalities for this whole concept. And he has also magnanimously agreed that we have a clearing desk that will be situated at the office of the Comptroller General of Immigrations. So when our members, when genuine business owners have issues, operational issues, in relating with the immigration or members of the Ministry of Interior, they can escalate to us. They can escalate to the organized private sector. These are the issues we have. And we, in turn, we escalate those genuine, credible issues to the ministry for quick resolution.
So a lot of interaction going on there.
Absolutely.
And as NECA, you have a fair coming on, Job Creation and Employability Fair. I wonder what is it youth? Is it for youth or do you
well, you know, depending on who you call youth now. You know?
youth at heart.
But what we do is it's one of the series of our employability scheme. You know, we are not only employers, we are not only focused on profits preservation, we're also concerned about the massive unemployment rate in this country. So one of the things we do annually, and in partnership with our members, is to create these fairs, job fairs, where we get employers that actually have vacancies to come and display their wares. You know, we invite young Nigerians, graduates to also come and interact with these employers. And the history of the job fair, this is the 4th edition. You know, the history of the job fair has shown that it has been a huge success for us. Not only for us, but even for the mass of job seekers in this country. So we have a lot of partners we are partnering with, those that are committed to reducing the challenge of unemployment in this country. Yeah.
So anybody can come?
Any youth can come. They will have to register, then they will go through a 3-week soft skill training. It's also compulsory. You must go through the soft skill training. It's also a part of our contribution to upskilling the young ones, or the youths as we call them.
As NECA, yeah? As
NECA, yeah. So you go through the soft skill training for about 2-3 weeks. So once you finish the soft skill training, your certificate, you print your certificate online. That gives you access to attend the physical job fair.
Oh, so that means you have to have registered a while.
Yeah, you register. We have sent the link is out. The process has commenced almost a month ago for Nigerian youth to check. You register, then you get a prompt. It will lead you to register for the soft skill. It's free. All these are free. Register for the soft skill. Once you finish the soft skill, it's self-paced. You can do it in your home. Once you finish the soft skill training, then you're completing the soft skill training. You print your certificate or acknowledgement, so that, as I said, we give you the access to the physical job fair to interact with
you can't fail, yeah? Is it participation? You have to get high scores and...
If you fail, you started on the path to not getting a job, because your certificate also will be used by the employer to see, okay,
to see if you are worthy to be employed.
You are worthy to be employed, yeah.
All right, so that's a message for the youths, whether you're youth in age or youth at heart.
At heart,
you choose. You choose. Thank you so much, Mr. Adewale Smart Oyeride, Director General of Nigeria Employers Consultative Association. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us here.
All right, now let's go to the global scene and see what's happening. One of the biggest news that we have is from DHL. DHL Express is suspending deliveries to the United States worth more than $800. So if any parcel that's higher than $800 would not be sent to the United States. So DHL is originating from Germany. It's a German company. They said because of a significant increase in red tape at customs following the introduction of President Donald Trump's new tariff regime, the delivery giant said it will temporarily stop shipments from companies in all countries to American consumers from today, Monday, until further notice. It adds that business-to-business shipments will still go ahead, though they may also face delays. Previously, packages worth up to $2,500 could enter the United States with minimal paperwork, but due to tighter customs checks that came into force alongside Trump's tariff earlier this month, that threshold has been lowered to $800. There we go to Japan, where Japanese super long government bonds drew a record foreign inflow last month as heightened risk aversion amid U.S. tariff policy banished securities law as a haven. Global funds bought a net of 2.18 trillion yen, that's about $15.5 billion of the nation's debt, with original maturities of more than 10 years. And this is according to Japan Securities Dealers Association. Net purchases across all tenures total 6.04 trillion yen. That's the second highest in record, dating back to 2004. Demand for Japanese debt has risen since March as the Trump administration's higher tariffs sparked a surge in markets. And then we move to China. China sharply reduced imports of many U.S. commodities last month, in some cases to zero, as the trade war between the two countries continue. Among the worst affected were purchases of liquefied natural gas and wheat, which both fell to nothing in March, according to Chinese customs data. The U.S. accounted for 17% of China's wheat imports last year. We haven't seen the end of this yet between U.S. and China. Still in China, it has warned that it will hit back at countries that make deals with the U.S. that hurt Beijing's interest as the trade war between the two countries continue. Now let's find out what's happening in the UK along with this, as other countries are retaliating. We haven't heard much from the UK government. Cousins, I guess, is what they are. Juliana joins us. Hi, Juliana. Good morning. Happy Easter to you.
Good morning. Happy Easter to you, Innie.
Yeah, so, I mean, we haven't really heard much from the UK amidst all the tariff wars, just China, US, China, US.
We haven't heard much. I think, you know, the Easter holidays, the Brits do take that quite seriously, Innie. So as we know that Parliament is actually on recess at the moment, so things have been pretty mellow. However, we are expecting to possibly see some sort of UK delegation in Washington, of course, because we know that the spring meetings kick off, where this time last year, Innie, we were both there. But we've both decided to sit back this year, although, of course, Channel TV will be having reports from there. And I think people are quite nervous. Of course, we got that devastating news just a couple of hours ago, didn't we, about the death of Pope Francis?
Yes.
And I think considering his leadership on the global stage was pretty vocal in terms of talking about climate change and talking about geopolitics, I do think leaders this morning will sit and stop and think. And you know, yes, it is all about Donald Trump. We know that we're a couple of weeks into that 90-day universal tariff pause. So at the moment, most countries, apart from China, are on this kind of level playing field of 10% levies. And that is going to be a massive talking point this week in Washington. We know that Nigeria, of course, are going to be present in a delegation led by the Honourable Minister of Finance and Coordinating Minister of the Economy, Wale Edun, because this is quite serious. And, you know, time is ticking and running out. And I think countries may be more nervous because we just heard a couple of hours ago from China saying that whilst countries are negotiating for a fairer deal with the US, they should not think about backstabbing China. So there's a lot to play for. We're going to be hearing from the IMF chief, Christina Georgieva, tomorrow about the world outlook. But we know that they're already predicting global GDP to fall, I think from about 2.8 to 2.2%. So again, we kind of talk about this Trump tariff stuff as if it's just sound bites and a laugh. But it is quite serious. And I think that is definitely going to shape the theme of these IMF talks today, Innie.
Yeah, true, Juliana. That's all. I mean, I think that's all they're going to talk about. We already had that cotton raiser from World Bank President Ajay Banga. Got a bit of that. And, I mean, it's just all about the Trump tariff and the impact on different parts of the world. But let's leave that for a bit. You know, Nigerians are very interested in traveling to the US, the UK top on the list. And we hear that the UK Home Office is updating its list of a secure English language test for visa, for citizenship. Do you know much about this?
Yeah, it's a very important update. And as you said, I think Nigerians in Nigeria are always very interested anytime there's an update from the Home Office, and for good reason, because we know and we've seen on social media so many influencers taking advantage of, I wouldn't call them desperate, but certainly very, you know, keen Nigerians to get out of the country into the United Kingdom. But there has been a significant update which has been announced on the Home Office website, basically for particular work visas. I think for skilled work visas and student visas, to successfully apply, you have to have a secured English language test. And there are various testing centres, both in Nigeria and in the UK, that have been approved for many reasons. Some of these centres have now been delisted, or some new centres have been added. So it's just very important for you to just double check, triple check. Don't, rely on somebody just because they have 1 million+ followers. We know how easy these followers are bought. Just check with the UK government Home Office website to ensure that you're ticking all the boxes so that you can obviously make sure that you're applying in a proper fashion.
Yeah, very important information there, Juliana. What else can we expect apart from, I know a lot of eyes and conversation will be coming from Washington, D.C., but anything from home, from your home, we should expect this?
Yes. Well, home is Nigeria. So we'll be relying on you. But this home, secondary home, as I said, so we've got Parliament in recess. Of course, we've got tributes pouring in, of course, for Pope Francis. As you know, 24-hour broadcasting this is the kind of death that the media are going to be all over. So, yes, I think Pope Francis is going to dominate this week. But really important, actually, J.D. Vance, the US Vice President, he is in India to, of course, with his Indian wife, which is quite interesting, kind of flashbacks of what we had with Rishi Sunak going to India. Just shows how geopolitically important they are. But this is important because Narendra Modi is he's kind of positioned himself as the leader of the global south, shall we say. But, they're not exempt from those tariffs. So it'd be interesting if we have any fiery comments about the global south, as we did when Vance was in Europe. But nothing yet on the horizon in the UK, but of course we'll be catching up, won't we, Annie? So I'll keep you updated as always.
Yeah, sure, thank you. And Juliana, I was wondering if the J.D. Vance Indian wife visitation is another strategy. We know that India is already like a big market for the US.
I'm telling you.
Yeah, so maybe
this is great for them. They go, and you can imagine the Indian press are like the Nigerian press, as we were with that wedding over the weekend, right? And so for India, they're loving this. She's getting the treatment. What is she wearing? They're going back to her village. It's very nice, and it shows the importance of the diaspora too.
Yeah, yes, Juliana, interesting one. Very interesting. Thank you so much, Juliana, and I do enjoy the holiday.
Thanks, Elaine. Talk soon.
All right, so that's it on the program. We have to move to other things, but thank you so much for being a part of Business Morning on this Easter Monday. We'll do this again in a couple of hours. That'll be 1 p.m. Business Incorporated. Then you will get updates from the world of business here on Channels Television. I'm Ini John Mekwa. Talk to you later.